Hello, my name is Julie, and it is time again for Friendathon. So if you've not heard of Friendathon before, Friendathon is a readathon that I have run for, this is now the 4th year, and this is a readathon entirely based on reading like your friends do. I had realized that I had a lot of people that I talked about books with that they kept talking about their favorite books and I never actually got around to reading them. And I realized that there was not a readathon that I could find that was about this. So that's where it came from. Over the course of 10 days, you are going to be completing 7 different prompts by reading books that align with your friends' tastes in books in one way or the other. You are going to pick a friend, you are going to read books like them, they are going to read books like you. You just have a fun time reading like the other person and hopefully finding some new favorites. I have had luck every single year of finding a book that I adored during this readathon. The readathon this year is going to be running from August 2nd, when it hits midnight Friday morning, whatever time zone you're in, going to August 11th on Sunday night when it hits midnight in whatever time zone you're in. So this is a 10-day readathon instead of a week-long readathon, so this allows you to have 2 weekends in which you can read as much as you would like. So I'm going to answer some frequently asked questions about how to participate in the readathon, then I'm going to tell you what this year's prompts are going to be, and then I am going to give you examples of what you could read if you were to use me as your friend, or just to give you some examples of how to execute these prompts. And lastly, future me will be giving you my TBR because as of this moment, I have not planned it yet. Here are some of these frequently asked questions. 1, can I use a book for multiple prompts? Yes. Do rereads, audiobooks, manga, whatever. What counts as reading? Whatever you think counts as reading. I'm not gonna police you. Who counts as a friend? Anybody that you know, that you interact with about their books. This can be a person in your real life, like your family, your friends, your partner. This can be someone who is your mutual online. Or if you don't have somebody who can partner up with you for the readathon, you can use one of our hosts, including me, as your friend. You can use a book influencer on any type of social media platform that you follow closely. Anything works. And if there is a demand for people who are wanting to match with other people for this, I will probably try to set something up on Instagram. Another question, can I have multiple friends? Yes. Yes, I have done that 3 of the 4 years. It works best if you are going to be going in pairs, a group of 3, a group of 4, or a group of 7. That allows people to have an even number of prompts for each person, but you can kind of divvy it up any way that you want. If you have 2 friends who don't really know each other, you can do half of one person, half of the other, and they could just read like you. Or you can trade prompts around in a circle. Do I have to read all of the books within the time? No. If you want to count a book as read during the readathon, I'd say having read part of it counts, but you don't have to read 7 books in 10 days to complete the readathon. This is a very casual thing. There's no winning. It's just for fun. And the last question, how do I participate? So all you have to do is read like your friends. That's fine. You can read as much or as little as you like and just chat with your friend about the books that you're reading. And if you would like to participate even more than that, there will be Instagram sort of challenges going on. I have done a bingo board in the past, stories, posts, and templates, and post challenges as well. And I'm also planning on, again, having an Instagram group chat for everyone who's participating in the readathon. Let me tell you about our hosts. I am working with these same 2 lovely people that I worked with last year. They are basically my 2 best friends on Instagram. That is Katie from Forevermore Pages, which we have been friends on Instagram since before I was even a bookstagram. I was still doing bullet journaling at that point. And then there's Imogen from Emmy Reads, who I love. I know I can trust her reviews, constantly messaging her. They were not mutuals last year before we did Friendathon together, and now they are. And I'm just making connections all over the place. I think that's all of the questions covered, but if you have any more, please ask me down below. Now, the most exciting part, let's get into what our prompts are. I'm very happy with this. I came up with a huge list of prompts very quickly, probably because I hadn't thought about this in forever, and I'm happy with what we came up with. But let's start with prompt number 1, which is to read the genre of their best book of 2024 thus far. But all they are going to do, tell you what their favorite book is so far. If you have a tie, just pick one of them, and you are going to read that same genre. You can be as broad or as specific as you'd like. If their favorite book was Percy Jackson, you could read a fantasy book, just any type of fantasy. But if you wanted to get more specific, you could read the subgenre, so like urban fantasy, or like a book with the mythology in it, that sort of thing. Prompt number 2 is inspired by a prompt from the very first Friendathon. That original prompt was for you to pick a book off of their TBR that you've never heard of and read it. But now they are going to look at your TBR and pick a book for you to read that they have never heard of. You can give them a short list of books, you can take pictures of your shelves and they can pick something, you can send them your Goodreads shelf, anything that you want to can count as a TBR. And if there is nothing you have not actually heard of, just a book that they know nothing about. So this kind of simulates what would they pick up if they had your options. Number 3, I think that this one's gonna be great, and that is to read a book that they love that they think is underread. I think that the best way to do this is to consult Goodreads. If you go on Goodreads and go on someone's read shelf, you can sort the books by the number of ratings, so the number of people who have reviewed or rated this book. So either they can do this and give you a list of books that they've loved that have a smaller amount, or you can go through their shelves. I think a good cutoff point is 15,000 reviews. That's really a book that isn't getting talked about as much. And maybe something that's not a newer release and just hasn't had the time, but that 15,000 is not a strict cutoff. It's whatever works for both of you. Prompt number 4 is to read an author that they have given 5 stars to in the last year. For me, I am going to be counting this as a book that I read since last Friendathon. You do not have to read the book that your friend gave 5 stars, just an author. So they'll send you a list of the books that they've given 5 stars to, and you are going to pick one of those authors. Number 5 is to read a book that is somehow connected to their job. You can be as creative as you want to be with this. You can get as specific as trying to find a character who has that job, or you can be as broad as there's like an item on the cover that matches something about their job. If you're a student, they could read something that is set at school, or it is based on what your career path is going to be. If you are already in a career, it might be easier to do your job, or it might be easier to do what your education background was, just like whatever you're trying to do, whatever their daily life is like. If somebody's a stay-at-home mom, read a book about a stay-at-home mom, that sort of thing. Then prompt number 6 and 7 are the same every single year. I will never change them because I think they're great. I think they just work so perfectly. Prompt number 6 is for them to make a prompt for you. It can be literally anything, as general or specific as you would like it to be. Just don't make it like, you have to read this one book. Make it general enough so they have maybe a couple of options to go off of, but otherwise, you have free reign as long as you two agree on the prompt. And then the last prompt, again, as always, is to do a buddy read. So all you guys have to do is read the same book. Then you have another book to talk about together. This can be a reread for one of you or both of you or neither of you. All good. Now let me talk about books that you could use if you are going to use me as your friend. And if you're not going to use me as your friend, these are just examples of how to do the prompts. So prompt number 1 is the genre of my best book of the year. It was incredibly hard to decide, but because of a future prompt, I decided to say that Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang is my favorite book so far this year. It's definitely tied with some stuff, but for this, you are going to be reading a literary fiction. If you wanted to get more specific, it is a satire. I don't know how easy that's going to be to find. For prompt number 2, I would pick a book off of your TBR for you to read that I've never heard of. If you'd like to DM me on Instagram or comment down below and just give me a list of books to pick from, I can pick a book that I don't know a whole lot about that I think looks interesting. Prompt number 3, I'm gonna go through a lot of books and hopefully quickly, but I went through my Goodreads and found 12 books that were under 15,000 reviews that I gave 4.5 or 5 stars. I think the number 1 problem with this prompt is probably going to be accessibility. If you can't get your hands on any of these books, you can go to my Goodreads and find a more popular book that is still not very popular. But we have Where Futures End by Parker Peavyhouse. This is a science fiction told in 5 stories that all take place in the same world, like decades and hundreds of years apart, in which humanity makes contact with another plane of existence, and we see in these stories how the world has developed to cope with this. There's The Helm of Midnight, which is a fantasy with a little bit of horror in it. Lots of stuff going on here, but the main gist is that a mask imbued with the soul of a notorious serial killer has been stolen, and the killings are happening again. We've got The Haunting of Alejandra by V. Castro. This is a horror inspired by La Llorona about a modern woman whose life's not what she thought it would be, and she's at the brink when an entity starts haunting her and her children. Then we've got Dig by A.S. King, which is one of the most uniquely written books I've ever read. It's a speculative YA fiction which is about 5 different teenagers living in a small town. Really hard to give it a synopsis, but it has to do a lot with white privilege. Old Enough by Haley Jacobson, which is about a college student who is trying to come into her own queer identity, and she's also struggling with her former best friend's wedding coming up and having to deal with her brother who she has a bad past with. The Future of Another Timeline by Annalee Newitz is about a world in which time travel has existed for all of human history. Time travelers are the only ones who notice when the timeline changes, and our main character, who is a professional time traveler, has been realizing that the rights of women, queer people, and people of color are slowly being taken away. Summer of Salt is a YA magical realism about a family of girls who, at least by the time they turn 18, they always manifest a very specific magical power, and our main character is about to turn 18 and nothing has manifested. The Last True Poets of the Sea is a YA coming of age, a lot of YA on here, about a girl who was sent to the small town where her ancestors got shipwrecked after her brother attempted to take his own life, and she is having to come to terms with the destructive behavior she has had in the past. Starland by River Solomon is one of the most unique books I have ever read. Please read this freaking book. This is a speculative fiction about a woman who was in a cult for all of her life, married off to the cult leader at a very young age, and ran away when she was pregnant with twins, and she has been raising them away from society and ideas of gender in the woods, and suddenly she gets sick and needs to return back to society, but also something seems to be happening to her body. We've got Don't Cry For Me by Daniel Black, about a man who is on his deathbed and was never very kind to his gay son, and he is writing letters telling the story of his entire life and how he never felt like he could actually apologize to his son. We have I Keep My Exoskeletons Myself by Marissa Crane. This is a science fiction where the prison system doesn't exist anymore. People who have committed crimes are now given a second shadow, and our main character, who has a second shadow, is having to take care of her daughter, who has been given a shadow for her mother dying in childbirth. Then we have An Education in Malice. This is a 50s reimagining of Carmilla, where our main character is a poetry student and she finds another student who is just as obsessed with poetry as her, but she's also obsessed with their professor. So try picking one of these books, maybe picking up one of these authors. If you can't get access to them or they don't really suit you, you can look at the rest of my Goodreads list. Prompt number 4 is to read an author that I gave 5 stars to in the last year. So I'm just going to read off of my list of authors that you can choose from. We've got Frederick Bachman, who wrote A Man Called Uva, Natalie Haynes, who wrote 1,000 Ships, Julia Bartz, who wrote The Writing Retreat, Brandon Sanderson, who wrote multiple books I gave 5 stars to, S.T. Gibson, who wrote An Education in Malice and Dowry of Blood, Ashley Herring Blake, who wrote Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail and Iris Kelly Doesn't Date, Sangu Mandana, who wrote The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, B.K. Borison, who wrote Love Light Farms, R.F. Kuang, who wrote Yellowface, Jacqueline Hartman, who wrote I Who Have Never Known Men, Clint Smith, who wrote How the Word Is Passed, V. Castro, who wrote The Haunting of Alejandra, S.A. Barnes, who wrote Dead Silence, and James Islington, who wrote The Will of the Many. For prompt number 5, a book that involves my job, I am an aerospace engineer. I literally got a degree in rocket science. You can get any book that involves a plane or a rocket ship, or has either of those items on the cover. You could also read about a woman who is in engineering or STEM in general. For prompt number 6, I'm going to make a prompt for you, and for the last 3 years, I have just given the same prompt because it's one of my favorite prompts, but I decided to shake it up this year. So the prompt I'm giving you is to read a sci-fi or fantasy book that has won any award in any year. It can be a popularity award like the Goodreads Choice Awards, or it can be an actual literary award. It can be something very small or something very big, just that the book has won it. You can go on the Goodreads page and it'll have listed on the book if it won anything or was nominated for anything. And also there is a website called Science Fiction Award Database, which just has a list of every single award every year and which books won it. Very useful. You'll find a lot of books on there. If there's a book in a series that won an award, you can read any book in the series. If an author has won an award for like their body of work, you can read any book by that author. For example, in 2020, Ted Chiang was inducted into the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. So you could read anything that he's written. I hope that that makes it open enough that you have a bunch of options. And the last prompt is to do a buddy read. So you can read any book that I am going to be reading during the month. I'm going to give you the 7 books that I'm going to try reading that you can pick from. Or in addition, my book club is going to be reading The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah in August, so you could read that with us. Link to the book club is in the description. Now that we've gotten through all the options that I'm giving you, it's time to talk about my TBR, provided by future Julie. Hey, it's me from the future, and I finally have my TBR, so Emmy and Katie and I ended up swapping lists of books the other people could read and doing a draft of who got what prompt from who until we all got an even split for over an hour. And I finally have what books I believe I'm going to be reading. Because library holds and everything, things are kind of subject to change, but I believe that I can get all of these books. If any of my TBR changes, you will know because I am going to be posting on Instagram and there will also be a vlog, so you'll be able to see me read all of these books. So the first prompt to read a book that is the genre of their best book of the year. Imogen's favorite book of the year is If We Were Villains by M.L. Ria, which adore this book. Fantastic choice. She gave me the option of either dark academia or mystery thriller. And just to fit the book better, I decided to go with Dark Academia. I also had a couple books for my 12 Books, 12 Friends, 12 Months challenge that applied to this, so I am picking one of those books, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is a fantasy weird book, which is so in my wheelhouse. Everyone I know who has read this has loved it, but it's got a very vague synopsis of our main character Piranesi, who lives in this strange house with infinite rooms that's labyrinthine. There's an ocean in it, and there's only one other thing that is in this house with it. It's a creature called the Other, who keeps asking him if he wants to join him on this grand adventure of discovery. I've heard that this is fantastic and about like the human condition and broad stuff like that, but I cannot wait for this one. Prompt number 2, I got Katie, and she picked a book off of my TBR that she had never heard of. And let me tell you, she picked exactly the perfect book. And that is Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This is a sci-fi short story collection. I have been meaning to read this book for years because it inspired one of, if not my favorite movie of all time, Arrival, starring Amy Adams. If you haven't watched it, you have to. And it is in turn inspired by one of my favorite books, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. A short story collection is perfect for a readathon. I'll be able to read one story a day and still have days left over. Prompt number 3, to read an underread book that they love. I got Katie again, and I picked out off of her list Ready or Not by Cara Bastone, which is her favorite book of 2024 so far. And this is a romance that is about our main character who gets pregnant after a one-night stand, and over the course of 9 months is kind of trying to figure out what she wants to do. Her best friend's brother is sort of stepping up to the plate and helping her out a lot, and she's starting to feel things for him. Romance has, for the most part, gone really poorly for me this year, but I trust Katie's taste implicitly. She has not led me astray yet. For prompt number 4, to read an author that they gave 5 stars to within the year, I got Imogen again, and wouldn't you know it, she had one of the authors on this shelf, and that is Bonnie Garmus, who wrote Lessons in Chemistry. So this is about our main character, Elizabeth Zott, who is a scientist and a single mother in the early 60s which isn't a very favorable position to be in. People don't really like you very much. But she ends up the unwilling host of a very popular cooking TV show, and she inserts a lot of things about chemistry into it and encourages a lot of women to get into science. As a woman in STEM, love it. Prompt number 5, the job prompt. Man, this was the hardest one to do. I got Katie, and she is in journalism, specifically in TV news. Unfortunately, I have read the only book I know about that is about a TV news person. After a lot of deliberation on what was most in the spirit of reading a book about journalism and Friendathon, what things she would read, I decided to read Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the sequel and concluding novel to Divine Rivals, which Katie and I actually both read with my book club earlier this year. We both gave it like in the 4-star range. This is a fantasy world that is inspired by the World Wars, except for some very notable differences, like the wars being led by gods instead of countries. Our main characters are reporters who work the same beat and end up writing about the war that's going on, but they have magical typewriters that turns out they can send letters to each other. One of them knows who the other one is, the other one doesn't. Even though I very rarely read the same author twice within a year, you know what? It's nice to get a series off of my list that I started this year. I really like the romance in this for the most part, but I thought that the fantasy plot could have used a little bit of bolstering, so I'm hoping to get what I asked for in the second book. And the 6th prompt was very apt. I got Imogen, and she gave me the prompt to read a book that was published in the year your friend was born, which all 3 of us were born in 2001. Not only that, but both of their birthdays are right around when Friendathon is happening. So we will be doing some birthday shenanigans. Haven't figured out what yet. But the most popular book published in 2001 is Life of Pi, which this is a literary fiction, magical realism, little bit of surrealism. What is it? About a Tamil boy who is shipwrecked for 227 days on a tiny little rowboat with a Bengal tiger. I love a book that's like, what's really going on? What's real? I think this is the right time in my life to try reading this book. And the final prompt is the buddy read, and I ended up going through the 3 of our TBRs and comparing a bunch of different books, found a short list of books we all had on our TBRs that people could get access to, and we did end up picking my book club's pick for August, which is The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This is the first book in a fantasy trilogy that is inspired by one of the stories from 1001 Nights, and this is about our main character who is an illegal magic seller, and she accidentally saves the life of a cowardly prince and is unwillingly wrapped up into helping him procure a magical artifact. I have pretty high hopes for this one, so I hope you guys join us in reading this as well. Those are all the 7 books that I'm going to be reading. These 2 I know for sure I'm going to be able to get my hands on. The other ones are subject to change if I can't get my hands on them, but I have very high hopes. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about Friendathon or are just excited to participate, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And make sure to follow me on Instagram to keep up with updates about the Readathon and any of our fun challenges that we're going to be doing. But yes, if you would like to follow me anywhere, you can find me at the single link in the description. All my links are in there. Definitely hit subscribe if you want to see my Friendathon vlog, which will be coming after the Readathon. And as always, I will see you in the next one.